So we are here tonight with this series called Stories of Orthodox America, Part 1. This is an informal pastoral history with slides and various stories. And I want to begin with an exercise right away. A very simple exercise, asking a question. In fact, they might show us, help us to understand why the history of our church in America is so important. So what is the first Orthodox parish in the Commonwealth of Kentucky? It's a rhetorical question. I'm going to answer it for you, but in a roundabout way. So which ones are there in Kentucky? First of all, there's Assumption Greek Orthodox Church in Louisville. And the website there says it was formed in some way in 1925. And it mentions on the website that they met in houses. And there was kind of this sense of a community without a lot of details about what that church life looked like. At some point in the 30s, that community moved into two adjacent shotgun houses in downtown Louisville. And they used one for the church and one for everything else. And that was their church building for many years. In 1967, they bought a plot in the suburbs in what is now on the border of Oldham County. And they built a first temple there in 1967. And then in 2004, they built this temple, which is currently the Greek Orthodox Church in Louisville. So you see that the dates are kind of interesting, kind of weird. Like when did it start? You know, you can give different answers here about when the parish began. Similarly, St. Michael's Antiochian Church in Louisville has a very interesting history too. It was founded, it says in the website, in the early years of the 20th century. That's what it has. By immigrants from what is now Lebanon and Syria. And for a while, they just kind of met, whatever, I presume in homes or at various clubs, renting spaces, as St. Nina has done in the past here locally. They bought an old Jewish synagogue, and they remodeled it and made it their church. And that was their church till the 60s when they bought their current property, built St. Michael's, the big church, and then later on they began other phases of construction. Now it's a beautiful campus with lots of sprawling facility. And they planted also two missions in Bowling Green in the aughts, and then in E-Town rather recently, I think 2022, more or less. So that's St. Michael's. Which one of these is first? I mean, it's really hard to even know and to say. And when you start looking at records of churches, it's the same problem across the country, across cities, across jurisdictions. This is like a classic challenge. And we even see some of the same thing in Lexington. Of course, in a weird way, Panagia Panta Vasilisa could even, this is the Greek Orthodox Church in Lexington, now called Holy Mother, Queen of All. But this church, by the way, that's the old building. Isn't it cute? I love that old building. Now it has a different purpose, which I won't say. But that was my favorite little place in all of Lexington. But interestingly, the founders of this parish were all from a part of what is now Turkey. Like Father said, and we're commemorating St. Paisius. Paisius was from Turkey, where a lot of Greeks lived. And in 1919, there was the Great Population Exchange. And all the Turks kicked out the Greeks from what is now Turkey. And then the Turks left Greece, and there was this incredible ethnic cleansing that happened on both sides. And it was particularly bad for the Greeks, though. A lot were killed. But this group of people came from a village where they had this icon called Panagia Panta Vasilisa, and she was the protectress, the Virgin Mary, and that icon was the protectress of their village, and they loved her. And they carried her icon all the way from Anatolia, all the way through the Aegean Sea and over into Greece in that population exchange. And the people, when they got to Greece, they never put roots down, and they migrated to Lexington, which is kind of neat, right? So that's the origin of Panagia Panta Vasilisa Church. And they might even trace their roots to 1919 as they began their journey from Anatolia to America. The community gathered finally in 1948 formally and started some kind of organization. And here in Lexington, in 1956, they installed their icon of the Panagia Panta Vasilisa and began to use their original church structure here on the left. So, and then the next two parishes can't possibly can be the first. The first one is St. Andrew's Antiochian Orthodox Church. The foundation was definitely, though, missional, and the first parish in the Commonwealth to be intentionally pan-Orthodox in its founding, which is very interesting. So according to their website, This town, Lexington, was identified by the Antiochian Diocese in 1978, the year I was born, as a place to plant a church. And there were people from the Greek church who were unhappy with how Greek the Greek church was. And so they were drawn to this idea of making a church for American people primarily. And so the Antiochians supported their effort to establish a parish. And by 1979, St. Andrews was chartered in some form. And by 81, they had their first priest in residence. And then their temple was built in 87. So you can see that progression. But interestingly enough, they can claim to be the first intentionally missional parish that's cross-ethnic lines in the Commonwealth. And then, of course, St. Athanasius was founded explicitly in a missional way and is the first Kentucky church under the omophore of the Orthodox Church in America, which is something to note, too. And when is our first official start date in the St. Athanasius? Anyone know? You're new-ish. Deacon Simeon should know this. It's 2002. 2002. And it's funny, that's sort of a controversial date, in part because in 1996-ish, I believe, there was a group of people who were tied to Asbury who began their journey toward the Orthodox Church, and they formed a study group that became a little mission of the Evangelical Orthodox Church, which was not a canonical or real Orthodox church, yet they began that journey toward Orthodoxy, forming a coherent group over time that eventually led to their becoming canonically Orthodox in 2002. So some might even trace it to 1996. I wouldn't do that, but some do, and that's something they could claim. Others could even say that the church didn't start until, some people have this idea, it doesn't start until you have a building. Till you actually have a piece of land, you build a church, and that's when the church starts, and we could even say 2015 here. Deacon, you have a question? Be loud.
I was going to say, 1996 to 2002 was the longest catechism.
Yeah. It was a painful one.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going. Okay. But what if I told you there's another candidate for First Orthodox Church in Kentucky? I found this out less than a year ago, and I'm very excited to have new news. And this shows you the complexity of history. We realized not too long ago that there's a mining community near Harlan called Lynch. It was founded in the early 1920s, and at the same time, a group of Orthodox people established a community in the town of Lynch. It went by a couple names. It was called alternately, this is so classic, by the way, for American mission work, St. Nicholas Eastern Rite Orthodox Catholic Church, or Lynch Greek Orthodox Church, or Lynch Greek Catholic Church, or Nativity of the Theotokos Russian Orthodox Greek Catholic Church of the Metropolia of the North American Diocese. This is like so indicative of all the craziness of our churches. Interestingly enough, I called up the archives of the OCA, and my friend is the archivist of the Orthodox Church in America. He's a very old Russian guy, and he's brilliant. He knows all the archives by heart. And he knew exactly where this place was. He found the file, pulled the file, and we have records of it being part of the Metropolia, which is this group. The OCA, of course, was called the Russian Metropolia, or the Russian Mission, prior to 1970. And we have those records of this church being in Lynch with a tie to our diocese from 1922 to 25. So there's actually an OCA community, if you will, in Lynch. It was eventually... It was hit by a couple things. Schism with there was Catholics involved, Eastern Rite Catholics, the Unia, and there was also a movement. And we'll talk about this 2 weeks, called the Living Church. The Living Church was a Soviet-sponsored schism off of canonical orthodoxy that was very radical and super into like labor unions and stuff. And so a lot of those coal miners were radicalized by Living Church, and they caused a schism. And eventually, this parish fell apart. It was sold in 1929. And became a Baptist church. And nowadays, I'm told it's a community center. And one of my goals for the next couple of years is to go out there and ask to do a liturgy or some sort of service there and just revisit our heritage. Because this would be, I think, the first Orthodox church in Kentucky. Maybe not the oldest continuous, but certainly the first. But all this is part of our story here. All these things are about who we are. I don't know what the oldest church is. Sorry. So part of the fun is that in parsing the different stories of orthodoxy here. We ponder how orthodoxy got here. We can ponder what the issues facing the people actually were. We can consider what solutions they offered and how do those solutions work or not work, which is very instructive, I think. What can we learn from them for our own church life and spiritual life? There's a lot of lessons, maybe, informally to gather. Okay, another question for you. This is another exercise, real fast, shorter. When did St. Nina Mission begin? Anyone know? Who's been around since the COVID? Raise your hand if you've been around since COVID. Oh, thank God many of you are new. Good. If you were around during COVID, you know when St. Nina Mission began, I think. Anyone know the year? 2021. Technically, I guess. St. Nina Mission began in Berea in 2021. That was the first Facebook post about it. That was the first time we gathered and had a dinner together in a home to talk about starting an we called it the I-75 corridor mission. That's what we called it then. You don't have a name for a little while. You always have a generic name. You call it the Berea mission or the I-75 mission or the Harrodsburg mission, the Lexington mission, until the bishop assigns you a name for your church or your mission. So it was the I-75 corridor Berea mission, and we had gatherings at houses for a little while, and then eventually later in the year we had our first service at the Quaker Meeting House in Berea, and then in spring 2024, and this year we acquired our first rental space. We rented a storefront in Berea, and we rented. We fixed it up nicely, and we began to serve services there. I think one could give the answer when it began in all these different places, right? It could be 2024, the first liturgy. It could be the first Facebook post, perhaps. It could be when we had dinner the first time. It could be when the bishop wrote the first letter. It could even be when we get a full-time priest there, which could be a couple years in the future. When we have someone actually in residence there doing the work full-time. So this is all part of the interesting story of all this. So what are we doing over these few weeks of this series? Let me tell you first what we're not doing. We are not, we're doing that. We are not doing hardcore history. I have a master's in history, and I know what hardcore history is. This is not that. There's serious history that can and should be done. And I'm drawing from books that perhaps are wonderfully written books, but I wouldn't call them hardcore histories or academic histories. I'm drawing from this book, Orthodox Alaska. I'm drawing from this wonderful kind of classic OCA synthetic book called Orthodox Christians in North America. And then I'm also drawing next week, especially, and the week after that, from Lost Histories, The Good, the Bad, the Strange in Early American Orthodox. This is a hoot. I'm only doing one story tonight from this. But as we go, we'll hear more and more stories from that source. But we're not doing hardcore history. We're doing something else. We're not doing hardcore hagiography, hagiography is great. It's part of our tradition. In fact, Father Georgi, he'll be doing catechesis here all fall on Wednesday nights, but in the spring, he's going to do a short series on how to read the classic lives of the saints and what they're about and how do you see them, how do you unpack them. That's a cool, awesome focus, but we're not doing that either, though we're going to be reading about saints and learning their stories a bit. We're not even trying to tell every worthwhile story that could be told that's fun or interesting. We're not doing ecclesiastical propaganda, though I will absolutely call out things if I see propaganda and maybe say, hey, that's propaganda. So we'll talk about that too as we go, because there is propaganda all around these questions. So we're going to try to do some things in this class. We're going to learn some of the basic narrative of Orthodox America, maybe even talk about a couple different approaches to that narrative as we go along. We're going to learn about some of the major characters in Orthodox America, and there's plenty of characters who are very, very interesting. Father David and I are so much more boring than these early American priests. Trust me. These guys were nuts. Okay. Either they were saints or they were nuts. There was no one in the middle. Because frankly, who would want to come to America? Would you get normal people come to America? No, you either get holy ascetics who are awesome, or you get crazy people who have flunked out of their dioceses back home and are sent to America as a punishment. So I'm serious. We're coming to this. So, okay, we're going to learn some of the issues that characters in Orthodox America were confronted with and the ways they dealt with those challenges. Again, the good ways and the bad ways. We're going to take in lessons both in the sense of being edified. Well, some of them are very edifying stories, but also in the sense of learning from past mistakes. We've made many mistakes in our work in America over the last 250 years, and we'll talk about some of those things. We'll learn to see ourselves, our parish, our mission in this broader context of Orthodox America. Because we are, one of my critiques actually of a lot of the stories in here, not the stories, the people in the stories, is that you had a lot of folks becoming Orthodox in the 1870s and 80s who, the Russian bishop would be like, oh great, you're going to join the church, let's make you a priest tomorrow. And all those guys crash and burn. It's a complete disaster. And we'll talk about that more next week. But there's a lot of these kind of stories where like there was no discretion, no wisdom shown, and you had complete implosion in different places. So we want to learn from that and not do that, okay? All right, so here we go. The roller coaster begins. We have this entire class, really, we're talking about Orthodox America, but really we're really concerned in the big picture with Jesus Christ and the one holy Catholic Apostolic Church, right? So yeah, we're talking about our local church, our local situation, but we're always mindful of our Lord and his church, kind of writ large, because that's where I, as Orthodox Christian, want to be grounded, right? So this is, everything I'm saying is in the context of supporting our Lord, proclaiming him, and also finding the path forward with him in the church, in the Orthodox Christian faith. That's who I'm called to be, and we're Orthodox, right? Okay, so let's give a quick overview about our church in America as we kind of begin the story. So there are 2,000 Orthodox parishes in North America and 9 ecclesiastical jurisdictions. There's different ways of counting that, actually. There are 700 of these parishes, institutions under the care of the Orthodox Church in America. What are institutions? Anyone want to venture a guess? So this is a parish. What are institutions of the OCA?
Monasteries.
Monasteries, good. What else? Seminaries. What else?
What about colleges? Churches.
Yeah, I don't think we have colleges in the OCA, but yes, churches, parishes, chapels. There are a couple, I think, old folks' homes that are like run by the church. So there are a number with chapels, and then you could have other charitable institutions in many places around the world. You have church hospitals. You have military. We also have military chaplaincies that are run. The OCA actually is in charge of the entire American military chaplain program. So we kind of lead that, and the other jurisdictions coordinate with us. But yeah, we have a lot of parishes, institutions under our care. 700 of the 2,000 in America are part of the OCA. Among those 2,000 parishes of the Eastern, and I use the word Byzantine here because we need to do that a little more. I don't like that term. It sounds so Byzantine, but it's like a bad word. But it distinguishes us from the Oriental Orthodox, who are very, very close to us. We have a lot in common, a lot of goodwill. There's a lot of potential in that relationship going forward. And they're growing rapidly due to immigration. The Coptic Christians are fleeing Egypt, moving here in droves. They're building churches in a lot of kind of how the Greeks were back 100 years ago, right? And the Russians were a little bit earlier. So we have that going on now. And so what was once a tiny, tiny minority has become a group that's not much smaller than the Orthodox Church here, which by that I mean the Byzantine Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Church, which is us, okay? So among this group of Byzantine Eastern Orthodox churches, we have 7 or 8 or 9 main jurisdictions. We have, according to people in the churches, not parish number, we have, the OCA has the most parishes and institutions. The GOA, the Greek church, has the most people. So they have fewer parishes, more people. They have larger parishes and fewer parishes, but larger numbers of people historically in their parishes. So the priest serves a larger community of people. So the GOA is the largest group. The OCA is the second largest group in America. The Antiochians are third. You might call these the big three. These three have been historically the three that kind of have been leading Orthodox unity or trying to move that forward. It's been 2 or 3 out of these at any given time that have pushed that ball forward. Then you have other churches like I think the fourth largest, the Romanian Patriarchal Church, which can be confusing, by the way, because in the OCA we have territorial dioceses, and we also have We have ethnic dioceses, so we actually have our own Romanian episcopate within the OCA. That's part of our Holy Synod. It's Bishop Nathaniel. And we have a Bulgarian diocese under Bishop Alexander. Our bishop, he has 2 dioceses, the Diocese of the South and the Bulgarian diocese. We have an Albanian diocese under my seminary classmate, Bishop Nicodeme. I think that's all of the non-territorial ones we have. But anyway, but the Romanian Patriarchal Church is directly under the Romanian Patriarch, and they have a number of churches here. The Russian Orthodox Church has 2 bodies within it in America that are not totally related. What are those 2 bodies? Anyone know? Rokor, Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. And what else? The Moscow Patriarchal Parishes, which is maybe about 10 or 15 parishes in the whole country. When the OCA was given autocephaly, the deal with Moscow was any parishes that wanted to not join the autocephaly could elect out by a parish vote. And they formed the 15 parish Russian patriarchal community directly under the Russian church. So but they're administered differently, have different histories, different people, different heritages. Other than being vaguely Russian, they're totally different, which is really interesting. But anyway, okay, you have the Serbian Orthodox Church, you have the Bulgarian Patriarchal Church, you now have, this is the newest one, the Georgian Church is now here. They have, I think, 4 or 5 parishes, mostly in New York City, where Georgians have immigrated to in mass. You gotta have places where you have enough people to make parishes, right? So a lot of these places were big cities on the coast, where you have lots of immigrants coming and that sort of thing. There's also the Macedonian Orthodox Church. Why is that in brackets? Anyone know?
There's some complicated stuff with communion, right?
Not anymore.
No? Okay.
So the Macedonian Church was in schism from this whole body of Orthodoxy for about, I think, 40 or 50 years. The schism was engineered by the communist regime of Yugoslavia. It was a way to divide the Orthodox and Yugoslavia apart. And so Macedonia, even under communism, was separated out, and they were schismatic. Thank God, the bishops of the Macedonian and Serbian church, they healed the schism, and Serbia granted atonements of autocephaly to Macedonia. But we're all in communion with them. I'm allowed to serve in Macedonian churches now, but all the details haven't worked out. Probably won't be until all the Ukraine stuff is figured out. But anyway, that's a whole nother talk, I think. So, but anyway, okay. This is kind of the lay of the land here and who's here in America. In many ways, starting out this series, it's sort of a tale of 2 histories. There's sort of 2 founding narratives that tend to be dominant in our telling of the story of Orthodox America. And one is told by the Greek Archdiocese. It's a story of Orthodoxy coming to America. And it's a very interesting story. I lived in St. Augustine when I was newly married. My wife and I would walk down this road all the time. This is the St. Photius Greek Orthodox National Shrine, and it's a house that was occupied by Greek immigrants back in the late 1700s. I think 1767. There was a colony of Greeks who were basically indentured servants who sold their freedom, I think, to the British to go to Florida, which was at that time under British rule. They went to Florida. They were kind of serfs, if you will, in New Smyrna Beach, of all places, near Daytona. And they worked for a while, and the plantation totally failed. And these poor people had nothing. And so eventually they got help, and they were evacuated from New Smyrna Beach, which was desolate, up to St. Augustine, where there was an old Spanish settlement. And they lived in very dire circumstances, and they were very proud to be Greek, and they had a strong sense of faith. And they even did reader services in this house here. And so you might say Orthodoxy came to America right here. So I gave you all the history. They lived in the Avero house. And by the way, this is the renovated interior. I didn't love this then, but the Greek Orthodox Diocese took part of the house and made a chapel out of it. It's so pretty. I love going there. It's fantastic. And in the 60s, it became, this is the place where Orthodoxy came to America. But the problem with the story, though, is what happened after, like 20 years after this. Anyone want to guess? They all became Catholic. I mean, this is part of the story, right? This is actually the story. This is part of the story of Orthodox America. You had mass apostasy, in part, not because they were bad people. What else are you going to do? They had no way to get home to Greece. They had no priest. They had no bishop. They were all alone. Isolation, the pressure. This is not about bashing the Greeks. This is about telling the story of American Orthodoxy. This is the challenge of Orthodoxy because, let me back up for a second. One of my best buddies, who was the great-grandson of St. John Kocherov of Chicago, my buddy, his name is Igor. He's a great guy. But his grandfather was a missionary, we'll talk about him in 2 weeks, to Chicago. And St. John built the Orthodox community in Chicago, but he saw his kids not speaking Russian. He saw his kids being drawn to American culture. And he asked the Tsar, as he was like a little older than me, he came here when he was 24 to America, kind of like me. I became a priest at 27. And then by my age, he was having thoughts about returning to Russia. Why? Because his kids they didn't know Russian, and he was afraid they would leave the Orthodox faith. So he went back to Russia in time for the Russian Revolution, which was not a good idea. And most of his kids were eventually killed between the revolution and the war. His wife died in World War II. He was shot, St. John was shot on the first day of the Russian Revolution. He's the first martyr under communism. So anyway, but his grandson is my good friend. And I met him at the church that St. John served in Russia, where he was martyred. But my friend Igor, when he was coming of age, he was 18, 19, 20, he was looking for religion. And he had not been raised Orthodox because, this is funny, this is very Russian. On one side of his family, they were priests and priest family. On the other side, it was a KGB officer. And so this is like Russia, 20th century Russia. So it was crazy. So my friend was raised by atheists. His mother got religion in the late 90s and became very devout. And then he kind of started to believe. But guess how he found religion? He found some Baptists, and they taught him the Bible, and he began to read the Bible. And then once he understood the Bible more, he said, well, Orthodoxy is true. And he became a devout Orthodox Christian, and now he's, of course, very pious. But my point is, in Russia, when you're drifting from the faith, there's a community to receive you back. There's mom who's Orthodox, there's grandma, there's friends, your buddies at work who go to church. There's this culture to support you being Orthodox. Here, there was no support for being Orthodox. And this is one of the challenges of Orthodoxy from the very beginning. From 1767, this is the challenge. And so all these people eventually became Catholic. And now there is a parish in St. Augustine again, but it's not in continuity with those people. It's a whole different set of people, and not those people who came from New Smyrna Beach in Greece all those years before. St. Augustine is where Orthodox Christians first apostatized in America. And I think it's good to say that, not to pick on any group, but to say this is a thing. And we need to be mindful of it. And when people tell me, Father, you're too strict with us, you want us to commit to be Orthodox our whole life, I'm like, hell yeah, we're Orthodox, right? What are the worst three sins in the whole tradition of the Christian faith? Apostasy, number one, then murder, and then adultery. Those are the big three. So like apostasy ranks. So think about that, okay? So we don't want to apostatize and leave our faith. Okay. So the story that the OCA tends to tell is a little different. The outline of the story is well known. I mentioned this is a classic book, this book called Orthodox Christians in North America, 1794 to 1994. It outlines the kind of the basics of our story, and I think fairly accurately. But and you can look at it online here, by the way. If you want the link, I can give you the link later. Another history that's great along the same lines is by Father John Erickson. He actually came and spoke here about 8 years ago during Lent. He's one of my teachers at St. Vlad's, a wonderful, wonderful man. It's a great book. But there's a caveat about our narrative, and it's actually worth exploring for a second, because let me just give you the narrative in a nutshell. This is the best way to do it. So the narrative is this: that the Metropolia, or the Russian mission, the OCA's predecessor organization, enjoyed real authority across the entire North American continent. That all Orthodox looked to it for organizational and administrative support before the Russian Revolution. So from the time of St. Herman of Alaska, which is 1794, so our start date, the Greeks start theirs at 1767. That's when those people came to St. Augustine and became Catholic. They start then. We start ours at 1794 when St. Herman arrived from Valam Monastery with his friends to begin the Russian mission in Alaska. That's our starting point. So from 1794, our narrative would say, until 1917, Orthodoxy was united. Okay? And we would say these are the halcyon days of Orthodoxy in America, when you had one bishop over the entire continent, and everyone played ball together, and it was like paradise, right? The ancient church, it was like, Holy Spirit stuff. Well, that's really not true. In 2011, a wonderful man, named Matthew Namey, who is actually a lawyer, trained as a lawyer. He runs the orthodoxhistory.org website, fantastic website. I really recommend it. It's good. Explore it. It's a hoot. He's the guy that wrote this book, Lost Histories of the Good, the Bad, the Strange in American Orthodoxy. He argued that in telling the story of our origins, the OCA writers have tended to exaggerate the unity and cohesiveness of the old Russian mission, while not dismissing the vision of the narrative. Matthew forces us to confront that our classic narrative is an oversimplification of a very complex set of stories of Orthodox America. And I really appreciate this corrective. It's a very important paper he gave, and it's definitely shaped how I talk about the story myself. A little less triumphalistic, a little more honest, a little more sensitive to the complexities of these questions. So I recommend this paper. You can see it there on the screen. By the way, I mean, he's the author of this book, and that's him, and that's the book. So we have a couple copies in the back. You're welcome to read it. I hope you do, actually, but after I present, maybe. I don't know. Don't spoil my jokes that are coming up. Okay, so where does the OCA's history begin? I already mentioned 1790s, right? This is Unalaska, the beautiful Unalaska, part of the Aleutian chain of islands off Alaska's coast that goes out toward Japan. It begins in 1790s. Russia, of course, has jurisdiction over Alaska. It's a province of Alaska. And there's a desire on the part of the Russian monarch to missionize. And we'll come to that in a second. But first, before we unpack the OCA narrative, I want to give a quick timeline of the entirety of Orthodox history. Sorry, I forgot about this. So tonight, we're going to look at the early visits and missionary work. So 1790s until 1860s. This is the first period of Orthodox history, mostly focused in Alaska. In fact, everything tonight will be about Alaska because nothing's happened in the lower 48. You had like Philip Ludwell. He was that colonial guy that converted to Orthodoxy in Petersburg, but like there was no real parish life at all until after Alaska's joined to the United States. But anyway, okay, early visits, missionary work. This is the only period we're talking about tonight. The second period, and we'll do this next week. This is where all the fun stories are. Developing missions and mass immigration. It's like the Wild West of Orthodoxy. It's so much fun, and it's really crazy. And then we have one of my favorite periods, revolution, chaos. You didn't see disintegration. Orthodoxy is a big... Matthew Namey actually has an article called, I think it's called 4 Years That Almost Destroyed the Orthodox Church in America. And it's about the 20s and all that happened in that period that was just so terrible for the Orthodox Church. And we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. And then we'll spend the last week, hopefully, going over, this is a really interesting period, the emerging American church, as Greeks become mainstream and Russians try to be American. And then we'll talk about setbacks, new immigration, and converts up to the present. This is really interesting, too. So we have a lot of cool topics coming up here. But tonight, I'm going to just wrap up briefly, because I'm trying to do everything, right? We're just going to do Alaska right now. So timeline, here we go. The earliest record of any kind of Christian Orthodox person coming to America would be perhaps the voyage of St. Brendan the Navigator. We don't know much about that. We believe he came to America somewhere. He's there somewhere. Yeah, off the coast of Nova Scotia, Labrador, something like that. Okay, that's great. Fast forward to 1741. The Russians first visit Alaska to begin the process of colonizing. This is a map of their territory as mapped by Bering. Bering was the seaman who worked for the Russian monarch, and his job was to map out Alaska. In the 1760s, the Greeks, of course, end up in St. Augustine, Florida, and that's the first effort to do, it's not effort to do Orthodoxy, but they're just Orthodox people stuck in America, basically, is what it is. And then 1794, we have the arrival of the first Russian mission to Alaska with St. Herman. And I like to, it's kind of weird to even write St. Herman, because in that mission of 9 clergymen, he was the least of them all. You had a couple higher monks, you had a couple deacons, you had some senior monks, you had people who had lots of education, and then you had simple Herman, monk Herman. He wasn't even a priest or a deacon, he was a lay monk. He had no power to do sacraments, he had no great education, he was a simple monk who loved the monastic life, and when he was told by his abbot to go to the New World, he agreed, and he went. and obedience. And that's who St. Herman was. So, I mean, it's kind of funny that he's the one we turn to as our founder, because he's the least likely to have ever been a great, enlightener of any land. But that mission begins, and immediately there's failure. There's failure. Well, let's back up. Catherine the Great, not St. Catherine. Catherine the Great, the empress, sends the team out. She pays for their travel. And they go from Volam Monastery in the far north of Russia. And they travel. It takes them almost a year, from 1793 to 94, to get to Alaska. They encounter in Alaska a culture that's a mix of Native Americans, Native Alaskan people, and traders and trappers. Many of them are really nice people. Many of the traders and trappers love the natives and have married the natives. Literally, they love the natives. They married them, had kids with them. Others were terrible and abused the natives and did all the things you associate with bad colonization. So it was a mixed picture of how life was in Alaska under the Russian Tsar. But interestingly, the missionaries had a very different vision. They had a very enculturating vision of affirming the language of the people, the cultural practices, seeing the good in their culture and bringing them to Christ. The phrase we use, or baptizing their culture into the church, a healthy dose of respect. And perhaps the best version of this was St. Herman. St. Herman himself didn't presume to teach the kids anything. He just lived a holy life. He lived next to the village. He took care of the sick. When the kids were orphaned, he'd raise the orphaned kids. He would do his prayers, and if they wanted to join him, they could join him. He didn't do any, and he baptized, if there were kids born who were going to die, he'd baptize them, which you can do as a layman in Orthodoxy. So he was just that kind of person. And even the monks, St. Juvenali, the first martyr of America, he was an actual priest monk. He was killed by simply being a witness. He went to the natives, and when they threatened to kill him, he just refused to fight back or refused to explain himself. He laid down his life like a lamb led to the slaughter. And by his sacrifice, later on, these people came to know Christ. They remembered his peacefulness and his poise, and they became Christians. So that's the manner of our missionary efforts among the clergy and the monks, not among the Russian leadership. But anyway, Hieromark Juvenali and his companion both martyred in this effort. So that's the early time, 1790s, early 1800s. We have, born about the year 1802, 1803, we have a young lad named Peter the Aleut, who's I believe his father was Russian, his mother was native, and he was baptized Orthodox, very strongly identified Orthodox. And according to the story, he was a part of a hunting party of just native peoples going down the coast, and they encountered, it says in the life, Jesuits, but of course there were no Jesuits. It was Franciscan friars under Spanish California in San Francisco, and because the Spaniards ran everything up past San Francisco in those days, and they captured him and demanded he convert to the Roman Church, and the little lad refused. And they, according to the story, they chopped his fingers off one by one until he bled out. And he's the first Native American martyr we have in America. So that's a sort of marker there of time. 1815, that's him right there, St. Peter the Aleut. He's a Creole. We call them Creoles, right? Half native, half Russian. And then in 1824, a major moment in the history of Orthodoxy in America, you have St. Innocent, who is this young priest. He's in his late 20s. He has a young wife named Catherine, and they have a kid or two, and he elects. He's the valedictorian of his seminary. He and his wife elect to go to Alaska of their own free will as a divine calling. So when I said you had saints that would go, he's that kind of guy. St. Herman, St. Innocent, these are the saints who would go. And so they went, and he and his wife labored for many years as a married priest and matushka. He baptized thousands of people. He learned their languages. He listened. He wrote the gospel in a couple different languages and translated the liturgy into, I think, Aleut and Tlingit. And was a true enlightener in the ancient sense of the word to these native peoples. There's all kinds of stories about his life. Natives having visions about this man coming and bringing them the truth. And then when they meet him, they're like, yes, we'll be baptized, like miracle stories of conversions. This is his cathedral that he built in Sitka, Alaska. It was the capital of Russian America at the time. I think they called it Arkhangelsk. And then he ordains the first Native American priest, Father Yakov Nietsvetov. who is an incredible warrior for Christ. Father Yaakov, he poured out his life for the people. I think he baptized 50,000 people in his ministry, if you can imagine that. His poor wife died when he was young. He asked to retire. He asked to retire because his wife was dying. The bishop couldn't let him go because there was too many cares. Father David knows this. He tried to retire for a year and couldn't do it. But imagine if you had like people waiting to be baptized. Imagine that pressure. And so he stayed. His wife died without him. It was a horrible story. And then he was so sick and broken. He begged the bishop, "Please retire me." And the bishop said, "Just hang on a little longer." And so for the next 10 years of his life, he just kept going until he just died. And his memory was almost lost, except the natives remembered him, and then they found his diaries and all the things he did. And it's an incredible read. I hope you get a chance to look at it sometime. He's a great saint, a great missionary. And then in 1840, St. Innocent, he's in Russia to raise money for the mission in Alaska, and he gets word that his poor wife passed away. And against his will, the Tsar had the idea of making him bishop. And then the bishop was like, "This is a great idea," and he couldn't really refuse. So they forced him to become bishop. They sent him back to Alaska as the first bishop for America. He did so well in Alaska, they gave him part of Siberia to be over as well. And then in the 1860s, he was elected Metropolitan of Moscow and became the primate of the Russian Orthodox Church in those times, and was truly... By the time he was elected Metropolitan, he was blind. He served the liturgy by memory, and very cute, his grandchildren were subdeacons. So they'd carry him in the altar. They'd hold him up when he served. Yeah. So around this time, there were a lot of changes in Alaska. 1864, St. Yaakov dies. St. Innocent is elected Metropolitan of Moscow all around the same time. And one of his last acts, actually, as a bishop, was to encourage this next thing, which is what? What happened in 1867? What happened then?
Is that when Alaska got sold to the U.S.?
Yes. This is a major turning point in the entire history of Orthodoxy in America. This is when Russian America sold to the United States of America. Seward's Folly, $15 million. What a good value, right? $50 million to buy all of Alaska and all of its wealth. And we did that. The American government did that in that year. And it was actually supported by the Russian church, which is interesting because they believed that the doorway into missionizing, St. Innocent believed the doorway to missionizing America was through Alaska. And he had this beautiful vision of how that would happen. He proposed moving the see of the diocese from Alaska, Sitka, down to San Francisco as a way to begin missionary work further south. So this was the vision that was actually acted upon after his transfer to Moscow. And we'll see actually that in the 1860s, 70s, that none of that really works out. And that's part of the story next week. It's really, really sad and entertaining and bizarre. So we'll hear all that next week. But it's worth reflecting on the legacy of the Russian mission in Alaska. It's a very important part of our story in America. And it's certainly, while I don't believe in the OCA myth of this perfect unity, I do think the vision of Alaska has guided our church in America since then, especially the OCA. So what's the legacy of the Russian mission in Alaska? By the way, that's St. Herman's little house and church. First of all, the Russian Empire wasn't always great for the natives, nor was it always bad. It was kind of good and bad, right? It had pluses and minuses. The business interests in particular neglected and abused the natives, but they would be less bad than American business interests after 1867. I mean, the Americans, forgive me, totally steamrolled the natives. And we'll talk about these I'm going to read an account here in a second. Okay, so the natives are going to have it bad after this, actually. Second, but laying that aside, there was a real church legacy that came out of all this. A monastic ascetical foundation in the person of St. Herman of Alaska, kind of our founding saint, is this monastic ascetic. A simple person. Father Hopko very much loved to say, when God handed out patron saints, we got St. Herman on purpose. Because America, we didn't want some conquering hero, some great apostle. We got Herman of Alaska to correct us. This is a good word. So this is for our correction to show us the true way. So we have that legacy. We have the linguistic cultural sensitivity in the persons of St. Innocent, St. Yaakov, the sense of respecting the language and culture of people we encounter. I was told when I came here, Bishop Dewey told me, you must love Appalachia. Love the Appalachians. But they're your people now. Embrace them. This is part of who we are, right? We're going to love, we're planted, we're going to love it, because that's what God calls us to do. It did bequeath to us a functioning diocesan, parochial. What's parochial mean? It means parish. So it's a functioning diocesan, parish-based, and missionary structure that was led by a bishop. So we got that from the Alaskan church. It migrated down and became the root of our current structure now that we still have in the Orthodox Church in America. So I want to end tonight by simply reading an account written by Bishop Nicholas Ziorov. And he wrote this a little bit later than 1867. He wrote this in 1899. But this is, 30 years after the sale of Alaska. And he's pained at what has happened to the Alaskans. Tonight's about Alaska, so I'm going to end with this. So he said to President McKinley, he said, Alaska stands in need of radical reform in all directions. A limit must be set to the abuses of various companies, more especially the Alaska Commercial Company, which for over 30 years has had the uncontrolled management of affairs and has reduced the country's hunting and fishing to absolute exhaustion. And the population relies on subsistence hunting and fishing, right? So it's killing the natives. They're having to rely on the dole as a result of this. The population is reduced to beggary and semi-starvation. The Orthodox people, right? The people of Alaska. A limit must be set to the abuses of officials who, as shown by the experience of many years, are sent there without any discrimination, exclusively on the recommendation of Alaska's irremovable guardian, Sheldon Jackson. He's a great villain in Alaska history. And lastly, Alaska must be delivered from this man. By his sectarian, that is Protestant propaganda, he has introduced dissension, enmity, iniquity, where those evils did not exist before. It was the Orthodox Greek Church which brought the light of truth to that country. Why then try to drive her out of it by every means, lawful or unlawful? In the name of humanity and justice and freedom, of those very blessings for the sake of which you, President McKinley, declared war on Spain, it's the Spanish-American War, I make these requests to you. Will you be acting consistently if, while waging war for the liberty of Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Philippines for their human rights, which was not really true, but anyway, you ignore all those things at home in part of your own country, which has been wanting 30 years for the blessings promised to it? Are not we Russians fully entitled to demand of you for Alaska that which you are taking up arms for the people in Puerto Rico? The only thing that may possibly be brought up against us is that we practice the true faith. We have not yet divested ourselves of our sympathies for our homeland, the land of our faith. But is that really sufficient ground for blame and persecution? There is no danger whatsoever that American rule will be taken from Alaska and go back to Russia, as some persons might believe, if only for the reason that our church never meddles with the politics and our clergy never busy themselves at home or abroad with political intrigue. And then Sheldon Jackson, this awful person that worked with the president, responded back. He said, the greatest enemies to public schools in Alaska are the priests of the Greek Church. They've imprisoned boys to keep them out of the schools. They do not want their children to learn English for fear they may leave the Greek Church. However, the cause of the Greek priests in Alaska is dying. They are not citizens, but they are sustained by the Russian government and have been required to renew their oaths of allegiance every time there is a change in Russian monarchy. For the support of the Greek Church in the territory of Russian government pays annually a sum of $60,000. Their work is not progressing. In my opinion, in the 25 years from now, we will see the end of the Greek Orthodox Church in Alaska. That didn't happen. So Orthodoxy persevered. But what happens in the years after the sale are devastating for the Orthodox natives. And we'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about, of course, what happens in the lower 48 too as immigration floods into the United States. So next week we're having developing missions, mass immigration, great stories. I'm looking forward to you guys being with us next week. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.